Day 12 of the Trans Siberian Expedition was from Kuznetsk to Kolomna, a distance of slightly over 650 kilometers. Mention must be made about the discipline with which the control regulations are accepted by road users. Not once did anyone try to overtake or cut the lanes or anything bordering on something that would put others into trouble. However, drinking seems to be a problem because I saw a large number of warnings about that. The best warning I saw was a smashed up car mounted on a concrete bottle with vodka written on it. A very forceful warning indeed. Another interesting thing I noticed were thick cutouts of a police car at intermediate locations on stretches that were prone to excessive speeding. That not only served as a speed barrier, but also provided details of those who could be contacted in times of need. The hotel I got to stay in Kolomna was a classic, the Arbat 40 Meridian Hotel. It was a floating hotel on the river Moscow. While entering Kolomna, I drove into a fuel station to tank up. When that was being done, I asked the attendant if I could find a car wash somewhere. He asked me to take the car to the facility just behind the fuel station. The woman in charge there, seeing the condition of the car, did a most thorough job. She also asked about the trip and gave the cheetah more than the usual attention. In the end, the car was gleaming and ready for the final assault of the summit. As I drove into the beautiful city of Kolomna, I could not believe my eyes. It had a paradisical look to it. But I was surprised to know that the city had been closed to visitors till 1994 because it was producing missile components. It is believed to have been founded between 1140 AD and 1160. The city is a well-preserved ancient site and stands on the sharp bend of the river Moscow, and this gives the city its name. Churches, monasteries, and many places of worship, remnants of the old fortress and walls, old residences, even its Kremlin and the modern speed skating rink, and the fine square called for a leisurely walk, with each one demanding time to take in its history and architecture. I was most fascinated though during the walk to see two young boys on bicycles stopping at a water sump to slake their thirst. That's something we do not find in India these days, even in the villages. Boy, wasn't I happy that I chose to stay in Kolomna instead of traveling through to Moscow. There is a special reason why I chose Kolomna. Moscow is known for its notorious traffic snarls, particularly during the peak hours. To save time of going into and out of Moscow, I decided to stay in the outskirts. The options were Bonutsi and Kolomna. I could not locate very many accommodation options in Bonutsi, and therefore I zeroed in on Kolomna. The final day of the Trans Siberian Expedition was from Kolomna to St. Petersburg, a distance of 825 kilometers. The last lap started at about 6:30 in the morning from Kolomna, and bypassing Moscow, I reached St. Petersburg at 3:15 in the afternoon. The termination point of the expedition was supposed to be the St. Isaac's Cathedral in St. Petersburg. Try as I might, I couldn't find a place to park the car. But then I found a police car almost opposite the St. Isaac's Cathedral. I went and parked by the side of it, and a very surprised policeman came out of the car, and I told him that I had driven all the way from India. The policeman gave me 1 minute to complete whatever formalities I wanted to and vamoose from the place. The policeman affixed the sticker, and that signified the end of the expedition. Thereafter, it was a job trying to find the place which I had booked for my overnight stay in St. Petersburg. A heavy downpour almost submerged the entire city. After a long search and getting lost for a while, I finally landed up where I was booked. Even though I had technically reached the place where I was booked to stay, I could not gain entry into the flat because I neither knew the number of the flat nor did I know Russian to speak to the security guards. Finally, it was Karen, a Georgian, who came to my rescue. He contacted the flat owner called Natasha, who responded after a very long time and sent a person to gain my admittance into the flat. The person who had come to hand over the keys of the flat demanded a huge bakshish. When I refused that, he started threatening me. I had to seek refuge in the intercession of another Russian friend, and finally, I managed to whittle down the bakshish to 200 rubles. It was already 10 p.m. by the time I got entry into the flat. I still had a huge lot of work to do because the next day I had to hand over the champion to the container freight station for shipment back to India. I had to do a lot of repacking, and I had to decide what I could take with me on the trip back to India and what could be left in the car. Closer to midnight, everything was done, and then it was vodka time. The Trans Siberian Expedition from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg, a distance of 10,117 kilometers, had been completed in 12 days, 10 hours, and 45 minutes, at an incredible average of 810 kilometers per day. If I had thought that all the stresses of the Trans Siberian Expedition were behind me, I was completely mistaken. This day, when the car was to be handed over to the container freight station, turned out to be a day of high drama and massive stress. Igor, my contact in Russia, who was supposed to facilitate the transshipment of the car, suddenly backed out at 9 o'clock in the morning. I had to virtually fall at his feet. Igor was my only contact in St. Petersburg. Not knowing the language and not having another friend in the city was a great handicap. After nearly an hour of back and forth, Igor seemed to be mollified. But I had to settle for a price at almost double the originally agreed upon rate. Igor deputed one of his young friends called Roman, who worked in the port of St. Petersburg. A lot of paperwork had to be done. The car papers had to be translated, notarized, and then submitted to the container freight station for the booking of the car to India. It took up almost the entire day, and I was fearful that I would not be able to hand over the car to the container freight station. Thanks to the influence of Igor at the container freight station, they remained open late into the evening just for my sake, and then took in the car, and by 10:30 in the night, all work was done, and the car was safely lodged in the container freight terminal. This day was exclusively set apart for sightseeing, but the weather gods deemed otherwise. The first half of the day was completely rained out. I had to spend most of the time indoors on the 13th floor flat, where the howling winds and sweeping rain kept me company in the balcony of the flat. The Nevsky Prospect is the main street in St. Petersburg and serves as the principal shopping area. The Grand Kazan Cathedral hogged the limelight in the area, the construction of which had been completed in 1811. Built on the Neva River Delta, St. Petersburg has a naturally interlaced system of tributaries and canal systems that run more than 300 kilometers in and around the city, with over 800 bridges crossing them. The Church of the Savior on Spilt Blood is a major tourist attraction in St. Petersburg. It is an arresting sight from anywhere. The church is modeled after the Saint Basil's in the Kremlin, and its colorful onion rings are as captivating as the ones in Moscow. The palace square was being decked up for some major event. 3 huge stages had been put up, and they spoiled the grandness of the place. I was told by one of the security men that the square often served as an open-air concert center for international artists. The Winter Palace, or the Hermitage, is the central building in the palace square. Opposite the Winter Palace is a monument to the victory over Napoleon and a red granite Alexander column, which is the tallest of its kind in the world. A short walk from the palace square lies the magnificent St. Isaac's Cathedral, where the Trans Siberian Expedition had come to end.